In this video, we're going to break down some kind of old concept art that just resurfaced for a Disneyland in Dubai. There's a lot to chew on here, and we're going to break it down up next.
Welcome to Orange Grove 55.
Welcome aboard to another episode of OG 55. In this video, we're going to talk about some concept art that was recently released. I don't know why it's out there right now, but it's kind of older, 2014-ish, of a concept for a Disneyland in Dubai, but there's a lot to kind of break down. This is a fascinating concept, which might bode for maybe projects in the future here in the States. You never know. Ideas don't really die over Imagineering. We've seen that over and over again. But before we dive into that, I want to introduce my fantastic co-host, my producer, my good friend, Dre, Vash Guy, Dr. Dre, host of Freshly Squeezed, the man who wears many titles. Welcome aboard, brother.
Hey, man. I'm so glad to be here. This is a very kind of interesting story here. And honestly, one that I kind of knew a little bit about. I knew a little bit of the surrounding stuff around it, but I didn't know that Disney was maybe possibly considering a theme park presence in Dubai. Up until yesterday when I saw a Bricky's thumbnail in my YouTube feed, also to Walt Disney World News Today ran a story about it in their kind of segment. So their news segment. So I didn't know pretty much anything about this. Or less in depth, unless I don't know, like an hour ago, doing research for this video. So this is a really fascinating thing. It's a lot deeper than people think, and I'm so glad that we're doing a video on it because this is a really kind of interesting thing. But to get people started here, if you want to go ahead and follow me, interact with me, you can go ahead and do so right down there at Vash Sky, right, like it's spelled right there. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now on Orange Grove 55 at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy news and info squeezed fresh right from the Grove, right there. And that entrance right there, we're not going to Disneyland, folks. We're going to the United Arab Emirates. United Arab Emirates. Sorry about that, guys. I do apologize. We're going to the UAE. That's where we're going there. We're going to Disneyland of the Middle East.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to all who come to this happy place,
welcome to Orange Grove 55.
I love it.
Love it. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to go ahead and bring up the concept art. This is fascinating. Really, really fascinating stuff. Okay, so this is the concept for this Disneyland Castle Park in Dubai. Okay, now, Dre, I'm going to go ahead and kind of hand it off to you to kind of set the table in regards to who's actually building this park, kind of the history behind it a little bit, and we'll kind of use that as a like a jumping off point, to kind of break down what we see here.
Absolutely, 100%. Well, it's really is kind of fascinating stuff here. This concept here wasn't necessarily commissioned by WDI. It was actually commissioned by a studio called, Vivali Studios. And if Vivali Studios, as it relates to WDI, sounds familiar, they've actually done some work for Disney in the past, going back to as far as 1992 during their inception. Vivali was started by Andrea Vivali, I should say. And he was a senior concept designer for WDI for about 5 years, leading up to his going kind of solo and starting up his own design house production studio. And he has done work in the concept design, development, and production and fabrication of theme park entities and lands. Like I said, going all the way back to the early 90s. He's done that studio has done work for Discoveryland as it exists in Disneyland Paris. They've done work for Port Disney as it exists in Tokyo Disney Seas. There was an abandoned concept called Glacier Bay for Shanghai Disneyland that they also did work on. Sunset Boulevard in Disney's Hollywood Studios, most famously. And for people, over in the kind of Anaheim area and Disneyland-centric viewers there, they've done work on Toontown, as it was popping up in 1993. 1993 there. So a lot of different stuff here. And why did Vivali Studios get involved? Well, it's interesting. They've also done work outside of the Disney parks and resorts. They've done work for Universal, for Men in Black Alien Attack over there at Universal Orlando, and at a not realized theme park called Dino Kingdom over there in China. So they've done work for other theme park proprietors and different entities as well. And in this particular case, it was actually a piece of work that was commissioned by what's called Riva Creative, and that was kind of working under the auspices of the Dubai Land and Dubai Parks and Resorts kind of entities there over there in the UAE. And the idea was the Dubai wanted to, and Dubai as part of the UAE, wanted to go ahead and center itself as kind of the theme park destination of the Middle East. Per se, like an Orlando type tourist attraction, where you had theme parks built by some of the biggest and best theme park proprietors from all over the world. And this included not only Disney but also Universal, Legoland. I believe Six Flags has kind of a presence there right now. I know there's some roller coasters being commissioned out there, and it was being built or being billed as this kind of theme park destination mega hub out there. And that's quite a fascinating take in itself. But the important thing to remember here when we're looking over all of this was really being commissioned as sort of a licensing agreement. This was not WDI or Disney coming up with these concepts and trying to sell them, as we are typically familiar with, trying to sell them to, corporations or countries or other entities and so forth. This was a kind of an independent outlet commissioning this work and presenting it to Disney for the hopes that they would go forth with a licensing agreement, very similar to how the Oriental Land Company operates its Disney parks out there in Tokyo. So it was kind of a reverse of the story that we typically see, and that's kind of where this concept art comes from. It was this was not kind of in the private halls of WDI, but part of this Vivali Studios entity. They leaked in 2014 while talks and negotiations were still going on for this piece. For this concept out there in Dubai, and apparently the information was still sensitive at that point. So they asked the original blog to remove it. I guess they did not, and this is how this concept artwork comes to us today. Was from those leaks from that design studio. So this is a really, really fascinating kind of piece of work here. We'll go over it in kind of more detail, but I kind of wanted to give our viewers the backstory as to kind of where this whole thing came from. Like I said, a reverse of the story that we typically see when it comes to Disney parks and experiences.
Yeah, no, it is. It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. It's really, and we'll dive into the details of what we're seeing here with the concept art. But right out the gate, you and I both had the same kind of epiphany almost, where we're like, the layout. Let's just talk about the layout for a moment. Both of us kind of turned to each other, going, "Epic Universe." It's
exactly.
Epic Universe, that long stretch with the lands kind of branching out of that long, narrow path.
Let me see if I can get the piece of artwork right here. You're seeing some other things. We'll get into all of those. But this is what OG is talking about right here. Very evocative of this style. Sorry, I don't mean to step on you. Go ahead.
No, absolutely. No, it just it looks very much like, look, the details are going to be different. There's going to be different, structures, what have you, but overall the layout and even the structure at the very end, that big hotel you see on the end there, the kind of the weenie, as they call it in Imagineering, that kind of guides you through the park, is a giant hotel. And even the castle over at the Dubai park looks like a giant hotel. The similarities are striking. Absolutely striking. I mean, it's almost kind of beyond coincidence in a way. It's kind of weird. It is
very interesting. I'd like to see what how much involvement somebody like Vivali Studios actually has on the Epic Universe concept, because hey, you know what? They have done work for them before, as pointed out with the Men in Black attraction and so forth. So they have a little bit of a working relationship, let's say. So I wouldn't put it past them to, you know, resurrect some of these concepts, because some of these are actually pretty good, and you can see. Yeah. I think the most, you know, distinguishing feature when it comes to this Dubai park and Epic Universe is definitely the kind of main icon weenie, sort of, as you will, that kind of brings you back into that area of the park, which is the kind of the hotel concept at the back of the park. And what's interesting is that they were thinking about the same thing over there in Dubai in 2014. So I'll go back to this right there. Yep. And you can kind of see in the back of the park there how it is kind of, you know, you have this kind of main icon or kind of weenie kind of thing that sends you back into that area of the park. And you can see different illustrations of that kind of park icon or castle park icon, castle hotel, illustrated in some of these other art illustrations and examples. From what we understand, and you know, the art pretty much brings us out, that was going to be a hotel. So it was going to be an in-park hotel, also a castle structure, also icon, which is kind of similar to what Epic Universe is doing. It's a very fascinating little thing.
It's very similar, and it's actually from Disney's kind of angle. It's really brilliant because everyone wants to stay in the castle. And I know you can kind of do that in Walt Disney World, but I think it's a very expensive experience, and it's very limited to like one family, or it's a very limited kind of thing, where this would have opened it up. Like basically like it's a hotel, like, you know, families can stay there. There's probably going to be like, maybe, I don't know, you know, maybe 100 rooms, or I'm just kind of ballparking it, but like it would be fairly, accessible to the general public, unlike a lot of the other stuff like the Dream Suite over at Disneyland or the Cinderella Castle Suite over in Florida. This would have been an actual hotel. I think it would have been a fascinating concept, and I think it would have been very successful if they actually built this. I think there's a lot of people that would have loved to have the ability to stay in this fairy tale castle. I mean, this is money on the table. Absolute money on the table.
It is. I am actually shocked and surprised they didn't actually go with a concept very similar to this for Shanghai Disneyland, because you would have thought that, you know, with that almost McMansion of a theme park icon. I give Shanghai's icon a little bit crap from time to time, because I just think it's a little bit too boxy or whatever, at least
way
for my
boxy
personal taste. But you would think that, you know, utilizing some of those architectural pieces, that they would have utilized that for a high-end luxury hotel concept, but they didn't, which was very surprising. Hell, they didn't even go with the kind of theme park hotel in a park concept like they did out in Disneyland Paris. You would have thought that would have been money on the table as well, but apparently not. In this particular case right here, this was definitely playing towards the kind of more extravagant, luxurious nature of this kind of area. Dubai is a radically different you know, city than you know, what we maybe experience here with our urban centers domestically. This was definitely catering towards that more wealthy or kind of elegant, you know, lifestyle that is, you know, some members of the community have. And you can see that illustrated here in a couple of different ways, but I think the most profound way here is that it was with that hotel concept, which is honestly, even if you're not catering to the ultra wealthy, I think it's an extremely good concept, and you can see them utilizing that for Epic Universe, which is fascinating.
No, it's absolutely fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. And one of the things we touched upon Shanghai Disneyland, and one of the things I actually really like about that park is kind of the willingness to sort of reimagine, kind of take the castle park concept in a different direction, right? Because up until Shanghai, all the castle parks were sort of this rigid, sort of same kind of thing. You know, for the most part, I you know, it's a Fantasyland, Tomorrowland, Adventureland, castle thing that they did. And then Shanghai came about and they're like, no, well, we can't do a lot of that stuff because of China. So we can't. But number two, we're going to try to reinvent this whole concept of a castle park. So we're not going to have a main street, which is like crazy, right? A crazy idea for a Disney park. Yep. And it was more about like these kind of like these themed IP lands, and it was just a kind of a different kind of setup than a typical castle park that we saw. And this is also kind of plays to that. You don't see a lot of, you don't see a Tomorrowland. You see a Star Wars land. It's not Batu either. It's a very different take on Star Wars, but it's a Star Wars land. You have Cars Land sitting right next to the castle, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's bizarre. And then you have this kind of like this pseudo Main Street, which is more like Fantasyland at Disneyland in Anaheim.
It is.
You walk through.
It is, and we will get to individual design features of this theme park shortly. I don't worry, it's coming. But I kind of wanted to key off on that point about taking the castle concept and really kind of doing something a little bit more radical with it. To give WDI some credit, they have had some ideas for different takes on the various castle parks. For example, I'll go ahead and show you. This was some of the work commissioned for Main Street as it relates to Disneyland Paris out there in France. And, interestingly enough, one of the original concepts that they were, thinking about undergoing or undertaking when it came to Disneyland Paris's Main Street was, instead of setting it into this kind of this turn of the century town that we might see in America in the early
like turn of the century.
20th century, 20th century, late 19th century, is kind of maybe doing something in the 1920s, 1930s. During that kind of prohibition portion of history when it came to America with the speakeasies and the gangsters and stuff like that, and that was really a concept that got quite far along there, and obviously it would have been done with some elegance, right? A little bit of subtlety and nuance. But the idea was, hey, that's quite an interesting time period, as it relates to the United States. Couldn't we actually bring that to life? And they were gonna do it, folks. I'm telling you right now, they were going to do the whole speakeasy thing, where you actually go into this kind of typical restaurant as you will, right? You have this kind of forecourt that's that looks very traditional, right? But then you could go to the back room if you had the password, and you can go into this kind of more adult-oriented speakeasy type of atmosphere and environment with a full bar and all that kind of stuff, right? And the main design conceit, which I thought was the main design feature, I should say, which I thought was really fascinating, was apparently every once in a while you'd have the cops check out the local establishment, and so these kind of features that would have been symbolic of a speakeasy at that time. You have the bar kind of flip, you have tables turn over, you have the bar area kind of be transformed right in front of your eyes. Certain artwork and pieces on the wall flip over to show some other stuff, and when the cops actually do come, everything's on the up and up. Maybe they interrogate some patrons and so forth to kind of say, hey, where's this speakeasy that we've been hearing about? Everything looks clean or whatever. And it would have been a fun kind of interactive kind of thing while you enjoy your drink or enjoy your dining experience. So it was a really, really, really cool concept, really fascinating. I would have loved to have seen WDI do their interpretation on that. Unfortunately, as Michael Eisner tended to do, he saw something, did something, whatever, and that really impacted some decisions down the line. We saw this over and over and over and over again. There are numerous examples of this happening. But one of the famous ones as it relates to this was apparently he saw some, I don't know, gangster movie in theaters when it was around that time, and apparently he had a very different association then going forward with a kind of gangster-esque 1930s, 1920s concept. So, and unfortunately, that kind of impacted the project and it met an unceremonious end. But there were some, some things of this that did come out and make its way to other parks. For example, the kind of elevated railway system that you see right here in this piece of concept art. We eventually saw that in Tokyo Disney Seas, for example. Right. So, no good idea ever truly dies, but... No. It was just kind of sad.
And even to a much lesser degree, a much watered down degree, we saw kind of the same time period and kind of essence kind of with Buena Vista Street, right? The 20s and 30s kind of era, kind of represented in the entrance to a park. Look, obviously you're not going to have like the speakeasy and the whole gangster thing and the cops coming and all that.
Sure.
But it kind of is that same era, that kind of same energy. And look, Disney, if you're watching this, if you want to resurrect that concept and go all out with it and totally bulldoze Hollywoodland at DCA and do this Dick Tracy gangster thing over at Hollywoodland, the fans would totally not be upset with you. They would not be mad. We would all love that.
Oh, yeah. And you could even do it, you could kind of do a pseudo kind of crazy take on it as it relates to, like, I don't know, somebody like Captain America. I understand that it's a little bit before his time there, but you can kind of do something that kind of plays into the Captain America mythos and even the Tony Stark mythos and stuff like that. I think you could really do some great concepts as it relates to both those characters in Marvel. If you need an IP to center it around, I think it would be really, really fascinating. The piece of artwork that I'm showing you guys right now. So, there were some radical concepts as part of Disneyland Paris back in the day, and I just wanted to go ahead and illustrate just one of those and how they were kind of thinking outside the box when it came to all things typical Castle Park. In this way, this was their concept for the castle out there in Disneyland Paris, as crazy as it sounds and looks. And the idea was, should we go in a kind of a radical direction when it came to a kind of a weenie or a kind of essential icon for this park? Because you think about it, a castle in Europe, I mean, it's like, it's kind of typical over there, and you're going against actual castles who had very established and long European histories attached to them, pieces, architectural pieces that were used in actual battles and so forth. So how could you necessarily compete with that? Should you go into a more radical direction when it came to the design of a castle type structure? And this was one of those concepts right here. I don't necessarily know what they were trying to evoke here. I had to do a little bit more research on this myself, but it
looks a little just. Like from a layman's perspective, it looks a little like Jules Verne. Yeah. That kind of like steampunk Jules Verne thing that was really big when Eisner was.
I think the Imagineers were really excited about the prospect of bringing kind of a Jules Vernean concepts to life, especially as so many of them were influenced by 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea and so forth. I think they were really kind of wanting to bring that out to your point, and that was obviously the design. Motivation for Discoveryland, right? And I think they wanted to go ahead and do this here with this. I'll say this, I mean, it's different. It's a different thing, and I can't really think of Disneyland Paris without its what I believe is the best castle ever designed for any Disney park around the world. I mean, it is a phenomenal piece of architectural styling, design, and so forth. But this was kind of this idea, like, hey, let's do something radically different because we have to play to the country that we're setting this these things in. Now, eventually, they went a little bit more typical, right? They went a little bit more maybe safe, and it became an extended love letter to Disneyland in California.
Right.
But they have had these kind of ideas before, for sure.
And this looks a little Cloud City in Star Wars too, even.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah, definitely. Bespin gas
Right?
refinery type look to it, right? It's a very interesting idea, and I think there's another shot of it at night. Yeah, there you go.
That's fascinating.
kinda lit
And,
up there.
and this is the cool stuff for people at home watching. Like the cool thing about concepts like this, right?
Yeah.
Is that like when we talk about this concept or even the Dubai Disneyland concept or any of the concepts we're going to bring up today in this video, ideas don't ever really die in Imagineering.
They do not.
It could be 30, 40, 50, 60 years from now. They might dig some of this stuff up and use it at DCA, Disneyland in California, a third park. You never know. And that's why it's so much fun kind of bringing this stuff up, because you never know where it might turn up. You never know.
You never know. And that is a whole kind of fascinating process right there. A lot of times some of the best stuff that we associate with the Disney parks, for example, the kind of Prometheus area that's part of Tokyo Disney Sea, Port Discovery, and all that. A lot of those designs harken back to stuff that they wanted to do when it came to Discovery Bay out there in Disneyland and so forth. So good ideas never truly die; they just get maybe reimagined, right? It's kind of what we can say for that. But look, harkening back on the other conversation when it comes to Shanghai and what the changes that they instituted there as it relates to Hong Kong Disneyland. I think the Imagineers really kind of learned about what. Yes, Disneyland in 1955 works, absolutely. And it has definitely stood the test of time, I would say. There are some operational elements that maybe, they'd like to adjust if they could, but c'est la vie. They exist as they exist today. But they did definitely learn some lessons there, and one of those is to maybe appeal to your local populace a little bit more, because at turn of the century Main Street, I don't think the people of China and even Hong Kong don't necessarily have the same appreciation for it as you might say a 1950s populace did for Disneyland in Anaheim when that park premiered. And so they took some different design elements in order to more closely cater to the Chinese population. And Bob Iger famously says, right, authentically Disney, distinctly Chinese, right? For this park in Dubai, I think you could say authentically Disney, but distinctly Arabian, which was kind of the design conceit going forward here. So I think it's time to maybe go into this park and kind of see what the design differences are. At first, when you walk up to the gates, you're met with a train station or a railroad station, right? That we typically see from the other castle parks outside of, I guess even Shanghai has its own kind of take on this. And this was going to be no different, but you can definitely see the kind of more Arabian inspiration and design flourishes that they were going for. That was going to be not only represented here, but also with the castle icon structure as we get into the park. But what do you think of this? Do you think it works? Do you think it works out here?
I like it. I actually like it because it's definitely one. Here's the thing I like about this concept is that it feels like it's similar enough to the traditional train station at Disneyland, right? Like you look at that, you see the Mickey floral and just the overall design. Okay, it's very reminiscent of what you saw at Disneyland in Anaheim.
Yes,
but it's different enough. It's more cultural for the area enough where it's like, okay, but it's not totally like rah-rah Americana that you see over Disneyland. It does pay homage and respect to the country it's in. And like you said, very astutely, where like it has that kind of like that Middle East kind of architecture to it, where it definitely recognizes the country it's in, but yet it's still very much similar to what we've seen before at Disney parks. It really does ride that kind of balance kind of perfectly, to be honest with you. I really, really like this entrance. I really, really do. What are your thoughts on it? What do you think?
I do too. Like I dig it. I mean, it's it's definitely, it's like, okay, we're gonna take the Disneyland thing,
right,
and kind of, do this new kind of Arabic take on it, and I think it really kind of works. The Arabian inspired architecture when it comes to just those distinct architectural features there, the columns and the kind of the curvatures and so forth. There's even, like, I don't know, I could be wrong, but there's like this kind of classic, almost European flourish to it,
right?
And you can see how those architectural styles really kind of inspired the other when it comes to their proximity with Europe and stuff like that. It's really kind of a fascinating kind of thing here. It not only lends itself to obviously the inspiration of I should say it's a design motif that lends itself to where it's situated, but also to its unique history, as it relates to the Middle East throughout time. So it's a very it's a fascinating thing. I dig it though. I really do dig it. But that's just the start, folks. We eventually have to get into this kind of forecourt area, and it was going to be a combination of maybe Disneyland's Fantasyland, as represented, kind of like a, what is it?
Bavarian.
It's like
village,
a European, Bavarian or European village, right? With Tony Baxter's 1983 New Fantasyland, but it's kind of a marriage between that and Toontown.
Right.
Which is sort of, kind of what eventually kind of happened with Shanghai Disneyland. Now, I think Shanghai, kind of blended those motifs a little bit, a little bit more in order to make it kind of whimsical and fantasy, and not really, have those two things represented separately, but they kind of blend it in a way that kind of, makes like a very unique kind of architecture, and one that you can't really necessarily, you can pick out architectural styles, but it's almost its new thing. This was, Fantasyland, Toontown mashed together in this kind of kooky, creative way, and I think it's okay. Does it 100% work? Maybe not, but it was definitely it definitely would have been its own thing as represented in Dubai.
Well, I think that, I probably would have left the Toontown stuff out. To be completely honest, I think that the Disneyland kind of Fantasyland European village kind of lead up to the castle is perfect. That really is kind of a perfect kind of like really immersive thing. Like what you're going through this real European fantasy kind of environment, and the weenie at the very end is this beautiful castle. It's gorgeous. It really works, right? The Toontown stuff is a little weird to me. It seems a little jarring. Mixed in, like there's no transition. It's just like, there it is. Like you can see it, like the pink roof and the green roof right before the castle. It's like, okay, why are those there? Like everything before it is very European fantasy, whimsical, and you have like the toony stuff, and then you got the whimsical castle behind it. It just seems weird.
It seems a little strange. I think what they were trying to do was, apparently this kind of entrance portal was not only going to be a retail corridor, as we maybe traditionally think of Main Street being, but it was also going to be a land in itself. They were going to have actual attractions here, like a carousel and some Fantasyland-inspired dark rides. we're going to be represented here. And you can kind of see a very interesting, crucial element that is probably the most different and something that we really have never truly seen before from, I believe, any of the main streets as they exist, is if you see this kind of entrance portal area, you'll see it actually curves. In almost like a kind of in the way kind of like a New Orleans does, or some of the other lands that we've seen from Disney. It was not a street; it was this kind of Bavarian village that kind of existed here, and I think that's a very, very unique thing. We've never really seen, we've always seen the castle at the end of Main Street. Or our take on that for the various parks. We've never seen something like this where it curves like this. That would have been a very unique design for sure.
It is. It is unique. Now, I do think that Buena Vista Street, if I'm not mistaken, I'm trying to find an aerial shot of Buena Vista Street, because I think that Buena Vista Street kind of does the same. Well, maybe not. Buena Vista Street, sort of, it's a street, but then the hub is sort of off to the right. Like you go down Buena Vista Street, right?
Yes.
And the Carthay is in front of you, but then there's like this circular fountain and hub off to the right. It's kind of weird.
Right.
Yeah.
And Shanghai does a little bit of like this too. They have this kind of forecourt area, right? It doesn't necessarily end in a traditional way that we hub and spoke and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, literally, there is no direct line of sight from your entrance to this castle structure. It does definitely, curve off to the side there, which I thought was extremely interesting. Even Buena Vista Street is kind of like, done kind of the Main Street way, right? Where you have this kind of town square and it's straight onto the to Carthay Circle. Now, you can't necessarily see it because of that bridge overhang, but it's kind of positioned the same way. This is, kind of radically different. And I wonder what the design motivation behind that was. Was it just to gain more room for the, maybe the Tomorrowland or Star Wars Land concept to the side? I'm not sure there. But one of the things that I think people should also take note on is how much of this park was supposed to be indoors. Now, we see what looks to be like show buildings for attractions, but in reality, these were, indoor corridors and spaces that you were going to be stepping into, similar to how you have kind of the Mermaid Land in Tokyo Disney Seas, where it's all kind of enclosed. A lot of that was supposed to take place here. Apparently, over 50% of this theme park concept was supposed to take place indoors, and that's simply because of the extreme weather in Dubai. So, in Anaheim, for example, I think the summer averages maybe 85 degrees. Would you say, or maybe that's on the high end?
Right.
Yeah. I think Orlando, it can get anywhere from 91 or 95 degrees, that kind of thing. It can get pretty hot, but I think the average is a little bit over 90. The average in Dubai is like 105 degrees. It is unbelievably hot over there. And look, coming from a hot weather climate place, you definitely want to be indoors. So I could definitely see the design motivation here to set so much of it inside, because that would have led to the comfort factor when it comes to guests.
Absolutely. And here's the thing to kind of think about too. We've heard a lot about Disneyland Forward, and I like to bring it back to Anaheim because it's my home park. We hear a lot about Disneyland Forward kind of mixing in, right? Assuming it happens. Let's just assume it's going to get greenlit and it's going to happen. Kind of weaving in the theme park with the hotels, like an extension of Disneyland will basically sit at the foot of the Disneyland Hotel. Now, this particular approach, though, now for a different reason, admittedly, because in Dubai they're doing it because of the heat.
Sure.
But could you utilize that same sort of indoor theme park land sort of concept for something like Disneyland Forward to sort of block out the intrusive kind of hotels looming over you when you're in land? I think that's a fascinating thing to consider, because if you were to apply the same approach in that same area under the Disneyland Hotel, you would eliminate the main issue, really, of immersiveness with those big boxy blue towers looming over your theme park. You just build the whole theme park expansion over there indoors.
Yeah, no, you know what? It's a very interesting thing you talk about this, because from what I understand, you talk about it in the instance of Disneyland Forward, and I would 100% agree with you. I think it's absolutely applicable. But for Westcott, they were going to have a future world inspired by, obviously, Epcot over there and Walt Disney World, in Orlando, right? And so, but this one was going to be a little bit different. Instead of having a sprawling land that you have to walk, crisscross and walk across to get to the various pavilions, they were going to have all the pavilions in one building.
Wow.
And obviously you have adjacent structures that represent the actual attractions themselves, but you were going to be able to access that all from, I believe, inside one building. If I'm not mistaken, they were going to have like the Journey into Imagination attraction as originally designed by, Tony Baxter. They were going to have, I believe, a take on maybe the Land Pavilion. I think the Seas and maybe Universe of Energy got a shout out there, but essentially they were going to have all those things within kind of one structure adjacent to the big 300-foot icon that they were going to have. A very interesting radical concept. We also saw, even very recently, this kind of land indoor kind of concept I heard was being thrown around for Cars Land out there in Walt Disney World. Supposedly, they did want a Cars Land. That was one of the reasons why they moved Kathleen Magnum in the position that they did, was to bring a Cars Land to life out there for Disney's Hollywood Studios out there in Walt Disney World. And interestingly enough, they were going to have, instead of Cars Land as we think of it today in Disney California Adventure, they were going to omit the town of Radiator Springs, do Radiator Springs Racers, because there is a representation of Radiator Springs in the attraction, right? So do you necessarily have to duplicate that? I guess not. But they were going to have it completely indoors and enclosed. The idea being not just for the heat, but for the rain. As we know, if it rains over there in Disney California Adventure, Radiator Springs Racers cannot. It has to shut down during that time. Well, that would have been, you couldn't have that for your big new attraction. What is it, Hagrid's? But you couldn't have that for your big new attraction out there in Orlando, where it rains every day, right? So the idea was enclose the whole thing, and you get around those. Problems. A fascinating take, and well, we do see cars represented here, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. The indoor theme park concept, which, like you mentioned, has been done with the Little Mermaid land over in Tokyo, is a fascinating thing. And it completely kind of skirts and gets around any kind of sightline problem that any park around the world might have. Yeah. And weather issues.
Yes.
And anything. It really does. Now, look, I think that kind of approach has to be done in a very minimal way. Use it when you really, really need it, because I do think there is something to be said about actually being outside. Yeah. I personally like being outside. I take morning walks every single day. I love being outside, breathing fresh air, getting the sunshine, right? Yeah. It feels good. I don't want it to go too far in one direction where it's like these theme parks are basically giant buildings, right? Right. So use it very, sparingly, Sure. But when you have to, do it. Yeah. Like you mentioned with Cars Land over in Florida, absolutely do it. Disneyland Forward, if you got to build a theme park around those ugly blue tower hotels at Disneyland Hotel, do it, right? So just use it sparingly. That's all I'm saying. But it's definitely an option on the table for Imagineering if they need to do it somewhere, I think it definitely is kind of a tool in the tool chest, right? And there are certain distinct advantages to it, like you said. Not just weather, but also even for lighting and stuff. You could have a very distinct land that's perpetually in darkness, or under controlled lighting, where you can do brilliant effects and all kinds of stuff. So it's a very attractive concept. I'd like to see it implemented. Somewhere, hey, maybe that's a concept for Disneyland Forward, something they can do there. Yeah. Like you said, to keep the kind of big hotel structures out. It'd be a fascinating thing.
I would say that they a good chance that we'll see it resurrected again in some way. Moving on here with this, what do we call it? Dubai Land?
Yeah.
I think it's kind of what it is, in kind of a clockwise fashion. The next kind of big land that you were supposed to experience was all around Pixar, but not Pixar Pier. Instead, they were going to do start out with a take on basically the animation courtyard as it exists in Disney California Adventure, but Pixarified, and actually the entrance to a big land beyond its beginning structure. What do you think about this? This is kind of fascinating.
It's fascinating. I am a big fan, actually, of the animation courtyard over at DCA. I think it's one of the few gems of DCA 1.0. I've spent hours in there. Hours. I have a lot of memories. Yeah. I absolutely love it. I don't know what it's like beyond this. Like, it's the entrance to a Pixar land. I would have to know a little more about the Pixar land beyond this. I don't know if, like, as much as I love the animation courtyard at DCA, I don't know if it's like strong enough to like be a land.
Right.
I don't know. Even an entrance to a land, I don't know. It's perfect at DCA because that's what it is. It's an animation kind of like museum thing that works as a themed land, themed entrance to a land. I think it falls a little short, in my opinion. But what do you think? What do you think?
Well, look, we were just talking about indoor lands, right? And I guess this is an example of it-ish. I don't know if I would have necessarily gone in this direction here, but look, the animation, courtyard is, I mean, it's famous among fans and seen as delightful for guests and so forth. My only regret regarding it is that there's not really necessarily there exists attractions that are maybe compelling to somebody who's only going there once a year or so forth, right? I mean, I don't get to spend much time in there, not anymore anyway, which is kind of a shame because I actually do like that area. As far as an entrance to kind of a land, it's interesting. Apparently there were going to be retail concepts here, maybe some dining as well, that was going to radiate from this kind of hub here. It's an interesting thing. Could it work? I mean, maybe
it could. Maybe. It could.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what exists today, right? In DCA, where you have these kind of, you have Turtle Talk with Crush, drawing with, you can draw your own character and so forth. You have the kind of storytellers. I think, what is it, like Academy or the Sorcerer's Workshop? That's what it's called.
An Animator's Academy or something like that?
Yeah, Animator's Academy. Yeah, that's it. Oh my God. And then you have a kind of a retail complex located kind of within, within walking distance from it, right, with off the page and so forth. It's kind of off on its own thing, but you do have those things. So we've already seen an implementation of it. This is just taking it one step further. What do you think? It works? Right. Doesn't work?
Yeah, it works to some degree. I just think that when I think indoor theme park, I think a little more ambitious than what we're seeing. I think for Hollywood, the Hollywood stretch, it's not really like the indoor theme park. It's not an indoor theme park. It's more like you're walking into like a showcase of animation and a celebration of animation, paying homage to animation. As its own land, as its own thing. I don't know. I'd have to see more of it. It's cool. And like I said, I really do love the animation building over at DCA. So, I think I just have to see. For me, my overall opinion on this concept would have to be, I have to know a little more. What else is kind of going in around it? And
well, I can go ahead and tell you. If you see right there, as it veers off to the right, that actually leads to the Radiator Springs Racers attraction. So let's see if I can get an overhead shot here.
Let's do it.
Of it right there. So you can see that kind of animation as you walk in there. You walk into the kind of animation courtyard, right, as we kind of experienced it in DCA, and one of those portals would have led to their take on Radiator Springs Racers, which was going to be maybe a little bit more. The outdoor portion of it was a little bit altered. But it is definitely Radiator Springs Racers. That is what this is.
So that changes things because, like, if you're using that courtyard, right, the Pixar courtyard with the screens and all that, to go into like a Radiator Springs Racers that's heavily immersive, heavily themed, I'm assuming, because ours here in DCA is incredible.
Yes.
So yeah, that's pretty dope. That's pretty dope. And is that the train? Is that the train that's actually going through there? Is that train?
Yes. I kind of missed it. I was gonna hit it up right after this to make up for it, but yeah, that the train was very interesting. So the train was supposed to go through, not just go around lands, but go through them. Which is kind of a different concept, right? So the idea was, you had a kind of a a railroad station, right, as we talked about before. But yeah, I mean, and it was supposed to be an elevated train system. So it wouldn't have been on the ground. It would have been a little bit high up there. In order to, cool. It would have given you like a kind of a Tokyo Disneyland kind of, hey, this is kind of a touring thing, where it kind of tours through the various lands. I don't know if they were actually going to stop there. I'm assuming they could have stopped in the kind of Pixar area if they wanted to. As you can see, it goes right through those those show buildings there. And it looks like there was supposed to be a Star Wars train station as well, if you look at that concept, which we will get into a moment. But you can see it cuts right through there, and there's kind of a station type setup. Now it's Star Warsified for sure, in order to make it more seamlessly fit into its environment. But it's a fascinating thing. The elevated railway concept going through lands, so cool. That's kind of a cool thing, you know. It's not quite like the thing that kind of irks me about Tokyo's design, for example, is it's all kind of just within the rivers of America, right? I don't know, Adventureland. I don't know. I'm not sure what they call their version of it, but it's very west side of the park centric, right? Whereas this, it kind of takes that concept, but has you visit different lands throughout the park on kind of this elevated railway type structure with stops and so forth. I think it's kind of cool. I think it's really, really cool.
Well, and the interesting thing too, and I know a lot of fans are going to probably be like, "Oh man, a steam train going through Star Wars land, that's going to kill the immersion." To be honest with you though, Disney has always the part of the magic of Disneyland is that you have Disneyland is very immersive. It is. Yes. You definitely get transported. But also part of the magic too of Disneyland is those kind of like blending of like these polar opposite things.
Yes.
The steam train going through Tomorrowland, right? The steam train going through the primeval world with dinosaurs and stuff like that. It's like these things don't make sense.
Yes.
And that's what's like so badass about it. Like I'm taking a steam train through the era, the time period of the dinosaurs. How dope is that?
It's awesome. It's just great.
It's so crazy. It kind of works in a weird way, and this is what's amazing about this is that you're literally taking this train through Star Wars land, through an Aladdin attraction, through Cars land, through Pixar. I mean, it's just these weird tent poles that you're going through on a fucking steam train.
Yeah,
it's so bonkers. It really, it just makes. I don't know. It's awesome to me. I love it. I love it.
Look, I mean, a lot of and that's kind of the shame, the new design motif or design conceit that we've been seeing for the various Disney parks and others is that it's got to be its own thing. It's got to be 100% immersive, and that kind
taking itself too seriously.
It does, and it kind of takes away from the kind of charming aspects of, hey, you have a a Disney castle at the end of Main Street, or a
Right.
Matterhorn right next to a submarine lagoon. It doesn't make any sense at all. But the juxtaposition of different styles creates this wonderful blend of whimsy and fantasy that only Disney can do, And they're magical experiences. Now,
It
look,
is.
I do love, and George and I were going to do a video on this eventually, on what is it, what they eventually end up doing in order to maintain the immersion for Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, right? When it comes to the rerouting of the train and that beautiful rock wall structure that we see out there in Disneyland. I do love what they did in that instance in order to maintain the immersion. But, one of the things that is kind of lost is this kind of juxtaposition of styles that they don't at all make sense, but they create, like I said, that particular brand of whimsy that only Disney can do that feels so at home in the various respective parks.
No, 100%. 100%. I mean, the quintessential Disney experience is walking down Main Street and seeing the castle at the end of the street. It makes no sense. It really doesn't make any sense why you would see a European fairy tale-esque kind of castle at the end of a turn-of-the-century American street. It makes no sense, but yet it works so beautifully. It, like you said, it's that magic of seeing these kind of the juxtaposition of these various contradicting kind of things in one spot. It's just amazing. It really is amazing. And I think you're right. Current Imagineering has sort of lost sight of that. They went Galaxy's Edge is a perfect example of that, where it takes itself so serious that it loses a lot of that magic, that charm, that whimsy. It's sad. It really is. Sometimes letting a little bit of that in isn't so bad.
I do agree. I do think so. It's kind of interesting, some of these design aesthetic choices as made by the designers. Just looking at this piece of concept artwork, we do have kind of a take on the hub and spoke pattern right there, which is pretty interesting. We also do have I guess, I don't know if you can see it, I can't necessarily point to it, but I guess there was supposed to be this kind of rock work that kind of jutted up and creating almost like a weenie or mountain structure in itself in order to get people down to the kind of Pixar area. Having an indoor land is great, but you had to attract people within it. And I think they were they were doing that with the kind of the mountain structures to kind of get you in deeper into that section of the park, because if you see the layout of it, it would have been kind of a lot of this would have been obfuscated by or blocked by some of their architectural choices. So it's a very kind of fascinating way of getting around some of these problems and so forth. But
Yeah.
like I said, going clockwise here, we talk about the juxtaposition of styles. You would have had right next to that castle, like I said, Radiator Springs, and that would have led you to a take on, I don't know, Adventureland instead of Fantasyland, as we saw in the kind of forecourt area. This would have been, let's see if I can get, we'll go with, which one should we dedicate this with here? Yeah. Okay, that one. This would have been very similar. Honestly, to me, it looks like what the kind of Arabian area in Tokyo Disney Sea mixed in with Adventureland in Disneyland Paris. That's what this looks like to me, and it's a very interesting take on this kind of land. What do you think of it?
I dig it. I think that's kind of like the perfect approach that you'd want to go with when it comes to a theme park in this region of the world. I like it a lot, actually. Now I'm not sure why Merida from Brave is there.
Merida?
Yeah.
It's
interesting. It's an interesting concept, though. It really is. And that's the one thing I love about a lot of these Disney parks. When they go to these different countries, they sort of build these parks around the country they're in. I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah,
And
I
you
do
see
too.
that really
I
on
do
full
too. I
display.
mean, it's definitely inspired by the design of the kind of surrounding area, through various histories and locations and so forth. It's a very interesting thing. We see another carousel here. I guess this is going to be the second one. It's a very interesting take. And look, I mean, if you've ever seen this kind of Arabian area at Tokyo Disney Seas, I can't remember what that is called.
I think it's called the Arabian Coast or something to that
Is it?
effect. Let me double check.
Sure.
It's Disney Sea. Yeah, you know what? It's Arabian Coast.
Okay. Right.
Yep.
Perfect. It kind of works as a kind of a land, and it's a nice take on the kind of castle courtyard area that we kind of know from Fantasyland. Here we go. Yeah.
I mean, it's
Exactly,
gorgeous.
100%.
I mean, of course, it's Tokyo, so they spent like $3 billion on like one building, but like,
well, yeah, of course. And there's a courtyard area if you go beyond those walls there that has access to more attractions and stuff like that. And I think the juxtaposition of this kind of style with the Adventureland style that we see at Disneyland Paris, I think it really, really works.
Perfect. I mean, imagine, and that's the thing. This is an actual building, right? In Tokyo Disney, but this is kind of a taste, assuming they built the Dubai park with quality and the same kind of sensibility that they did with Tokyo. But this is kind of a little bit of a taste of what you would see overall in that Dubai park.
Yes.
It's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, this is kind of like what you would probably see, like, you know, in that what you were talking about, that Adventureland / Arabian land. This is very reminiscent of that. I mean, I would love to see something like this. Oh my God.
It looks cool, man. It really does look cool. And we can even see, I'll go back to the kind of main concept artwork here.
I mean, it's breathtaking. It's absolutely breathtaking.
You can kind of see, it's just, I'm still shocked at how good Tokyo Disney Sea it comes off. It just like we were saying before, the juxtaposition of styles, the combination of different architectural motifs and design inspirations and so forth, it all just comes together just in this beautiful eclectic mix. It's fascinating, but you can really see that design motif. If we were able to zoom in on this image, unfortunately, maybe I can. Let me see here. Let me see. Oh, look.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, we're learning. We're learning, fam. We're learning together. You can see a lot of that design motif and inspiration there for the entrance of this land and just beyond the kind of courtyard area. Very, very cool. And again, it was going to be beside this beautiful backdrop of their castle, which I think looks really, really dope.
It looks really good. And that's the thing I love about this castle too, is that it's one of the problems, and you mentioned it earlier on in the video, and I completely agree with you. The problem with Shanghai is it's boxy. It's just a big box. It doesn't gradually come down to anything. It's just a box sitting in the middle of the park, you know. Where this thing sort of like, it's big, there's no doubt, it's huge, but it's spread out in a way where it comes off a little bit more organic, you know.
Yes.
It's not just like this boxy thing.
It's not this box mansion kind of thing that they have out there. It's literally like a mansion with turrets on it. It's kind of what it looks like to me.
Yeah.
I remember, oh man, I got to tell you a quick story. I remember sitting in D23, you know, in kind of their version of Hall H, right, with a big parks panel, and they were going on and on about this castle. Like literally spent 20 minutes at it. They got they had the virtual model, and they were spinning it around, stuff like that. And I'm just going, that is one of the ugliest things I have ever seen. And they're just going on about it like it's the greatest thing on earth. I'm like, this looks horrible. Like it literally, like it's like a box that's ornately themed with turrets on it.
Oh, totally.
In this way, you could have easily gone in that design direction, especially as it relates to like a hotel structure. But they spread it out and they kind of like, kind of zigzagged it and kind of curved it around this kind of the kind of perimeter of the park in such a way. I think it's fascinating. I think it's really, really nice.
It's well done, and it's good design actually too. Good design work because it's beautiful visually, and it also acts as a berm to the park because you have this massive castle now that kind of stretches a little bit. It blocks out a lot. And again, I don't know where this was going to be located, but I'm assuming there would be stuff that you would need to block out. Just about, aside from Orlando, there's pretty much every Disney park on the planet has some need for a berm. They don't have
they do.
Acre after acre after acre after even Tokyo doesn't have that. So
Right.
I like the fact that it's massive, but it's spread out. It acts as a berm. It blocks out the outside world. And I don't know. I really like this concept. I like this a lot.
I like it a lot as well. What you're seeing right now is you're seeing the back of the castle because that was going to be kind of the check-in area for hotel guests. And you can kind of see, where cars were supposed to come in and, have their car,
Crazy.
cars parked valet, of course. Right.
Yeah.
And you can see some of the balconies and so forth that people were going to have as part of their rooms and part of their resort stay. Even this courtyard area here on the backside of the castle looks really, really great. Really, really smart design elements here.
No, it looks beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Now, should we dip into what is their version of Tomorrowland, which is Star Wars?
One more thing before we get there. Okay.
Sure.
Because if we see right before their Star Wars Land, because I think that's going to be the most interesting conversation by far. We see this kind of, it wasn't just supposed to be one hotel, but we were going to get two.
Oh, the Treehouse Hotel. Yes, I want to talk about that.
The Treehouse Hotel. Now, this is really, really interesting. I've heard that maybe it was supposed to be like an Ewok Village type hotel. Yeah, like a take on it, maybe like the tree houses that we see over there at Walt Disney World, right? With their treehouse villas, but maybe like a more Adventureland or Ewok inspired take on them. Very fascinating stuff. If you want something that was completely out there, completely exotic, this was definitely where you were going to be staying. And as you can see, it buttresses up nicely to their experience of the Jungle Cruise. So, I mean, imagine what you could, see at night there, or as these various areas are lit up. I'm sure they were going to do that. It would have been just phenomenal.
Well, and this is the future of theme parks. And we've seen it now with the Star Cruiser, right? I really do believe, and I know this never saw the light of day, but I think eventually stuff like this will see the light of day all over the world for Disney parks. I do think that Disney wants to get into this kind of business of like these immersive kind of like in-park hotels they can charge an arm and a leg for. Stuff like this, like a Treehouse Hotel. Oh my God, you'd make an arm and a leg on something like this. You make an Ewok Village, you're making even more money. I mean, this is crazy. I mean, people would climb over each other to get into this thing.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And look, I tell you what. I mean, we've seen We've seen concepts like this come to life. Most famously at Disney California Adventure, right, with the Grand California Hotel.
Right.
But Disneyland Paris obviously kind of set the stage in 1992. And apparently Tony Baxter was saying, I mean, he had to get crazy approvals just for that because it was such a radical concept. Because I mean, think about it. Like theme park operators were going, wait a minute, what happens at 3 a.m. when you have the trucks and stuff like that? It's all kind of this bad show as you. Rehabilitate these parks, for the day's activities that will be following it. You have a lot of, utilitarian vehicles going around, filling up, store warehouses with product. You have, cleaning trucks and all that kind of stuff. And Tony Baxter was like, no, that's part of the magic. That's what people want to see, and he came at it from a theme park fan's perspective, not just a builder, designer, operator, whatever. And I think it was perfect. I mean, it was, it was brought to life, and they did it in such a perfect way. We're seeing this with Epic Universe, right? With their hotel concept within a theme park. Like you said, OG, you hit it right in the head. This is the new format going forward for sure. If you have a new theme park concept, I would be very surprised if you didn't include a hotel concept with it as well.
Oh, 100%. 100%. This is money on the table for them. This is something that like people would spend a lot of money to do.
Absolutely.
Right now. A lot of money to do.
The way it's buttressed it up, with the railroad and the Aladdin attraction concept, there is some stuff in here, man. I mean, I think they were pulling off something special with this. But that leads us to, last but not least, the Star Wars section, or their Tomorrowland section.
Everything is proceeding as I have foreseen.
Exactly. This is some crazy stuff here, folks. We're going to go off in a completely different direction than what we got with Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. OG, take it away. What do you think?
Okay, so a couple of things. I think the concepts here, from what I can tell, there's things about it that I like, and there's things about it that I don't like. I think the idea of having a Star Wars, like, I feel like this version of a Star Wars land is more fun. It's definitely more akin to like a traditional kind of castle park land, like we talked about, with like the juxtapositions of like being able to see outside things. Like, obviously when you're in this Star Wars land, you're going to see the castle. You're not going to avoid that.
Yes.
There's that juxtaposition again, like we talked about with Main Street and the castle. So it's not taking itself overly serious like Batu does, where it's like you're so immersed and they can't even have music because Batu is too cool for music even, It's like, it's not that serious.
No.
But, and I like that. I actually really like that. I think it's important to just have like this fun energy.
Yes.
Some of the stuff here, like the Jedi Temple, is dope as hell. I love it.
The temple, I thought, was like, oh, that is killer. And to make it your weenie, oh, so good. Again, this is some of the stuff that I was hoping for when it came to a take on Star Wars Land, or even Galactic Star Cruiser, right? Galactic Star Cruiser as the Jedi Temple, that would have been so dope. But go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I mean, most of what I'm seeing here, I absolutely love. The only thing that feels a little pedestrian, a little bit like okay, kind of corny, is the Death Star, the rocket jet spinner thing.
Yes.
That's a little too theme parky. I mean, look, I don't mind, like I said before, the juxtapositions of like the various icons, having fun, not taking yourself too seriously. The Death Star spinner, though, feels a little bit like OC Fair to me.
A little
I'm not
bit
into that. Yeah.
I'll say this. As far as spinners go, it's done pretty well, right? Like, it is. It's highly themed. They got some amazing lighting effects there. And if you notice, I don't know if you caught this, but if you notice real closely, we're zoomed in all the way we can be. There are X-Wings and TIE fighters.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So that would have been kind of like, oh, okay, cool. So you're orbiting the Death Star as you're having this kind of battle a la A New Hope in 1977. That was kind of cool,
It's kind of cool, yeah.
If you're going to do it, and they definitely did, and you got to give them credit for that. But I think the rest of the architectural features are very much inspired by what we experience on Coruscant specifically. Totally. We have basically the Senate structure that we see most famously. I believe the Star Tours, and that was what was going to be. The Star Tours is very evocative of the kind of shuttle, or I'm sorry, kind of spaceport / there was like this concert structure that I believe when Anakin has the famous scene with the Emperor, right? And the Emperor tells him
the whole like Darth's Plagueis thing.
Yeah.
Darth Plagueis the Wise, you know.
Darth Plagueis the Wise. You know, that kind of thing. I think it was kind of a take on that, which was kind of really cool. And you see a full-size Millennium Falcon right there standing outside, along with a Starspeeder 3000 as well out there. Or actually, no, it's the Starspeeder 1000. And you can see it right there, just below the Millennium Falcon. There
cool.
standing outside. And that would have been your Star Tours.
And that's pretty cool. And from what I can see here, and again, it's hard to make out. We don't really know for sure, but there seems to be almost like a monorail track or some kind of elevated transportation
That's the
system.
Railroad.
Oh, that's the railroad?
That's the railroad as it crosses into this section right here. And
that's wild.
That railroad station right there would have been right in the middle of the land. Not so dissimilar to kind of the New York section of Tokyo Disney Seas, actually, which is kind of surprising, but it would have been right there. And it was definitely had the Star Wars overlay or Star Wars treatment to it, right? In order to make it a little bit more cohesive, but it is right there. And honestly, I don't know, man. I like the hyper immersion. Don't get me wrong. I like what they did with Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, but this is kind of fun too. I gotta be honest. This is pretty fun.
Well, and that's what they should do. Is what they should do is they should experiment with Star Wars. You have this IP that you can really do just about anything with it. Why pigeonhole yourself into one version of that experience? You know, like I would love to see another version. That's why I was really looking forward to Disneyland Paris or the Walt Disney Studios in Paris getting a version of Star Wars Land, because I was hoping that we would get some kind of different version of a Star Wars Land. And I think they've canceled it now and they're going in another direction, which is disappointing. You have this great property. I mean, you could literally build an entire theme park around Star Wars. I mean, there's so much potential there, and I just feel like it's being completely wasted. Like do different stuff with it. You know, I just want to see other stuff.
The bones of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge are so high. It executed to just in a stunning and high degree. It is kind of even the version of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge that we did get, not just the franchise itself, but the version that we did get it's being wasted. You know, it's like, man, let's do some more. You know, let's bring in some more characters. Let's do some different activities. Let's do like the Legends of Frontierland type, playing an interactive element that you were going to do. Let's bring that kind of stuff in. I think it would completely rejuvenize this land and get people thinking about it on a different, level that was the original intent behind Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Star Wars Galaxy's Edge was never supposed to be just a nice looking land. It was supposed to be a living land, a living, breathing, interactive land that your story was supposed to take part in, not just you waiting in line for the next attraction or getting a Rise of Resistance boarding pass or whatever, or individual lightning lane. It was never supposed to be that. It was supposed to be a more holistic, a different cerebral type experience that was supposed to immerse you into this living environment. And that's what kind of makes Star Wars Galaxy's Edge fall apart when you don't have those elements, in it. If you were going to go with a more traditional land, as what eventually happened with Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, I think this interpretation of it, featured in Dubai, I think is kind of the way to go if you're going to do that.
Right. No, 100%. And one of the things I know is a completely different era, but it's one of the things I loved about like Walt Disney's approach to like theme parks, or the only theme park we knew was really Disneyland. But the one thing that I love about his approach was just like he kind of approached it like I'm an adult, but like I'm kind of seeing it from like if I was like Walt Disney in his 60s was kind of approaching Disneyland like, okay, what would 10-year-old Walt want?
Yes.
Oh, we'll do a train, and the train will go around, and there'll be a castle, and there'll be a Matterhorn and a monorail, and it's just like this kind of sandbox of like this kid's dream, like all these cool things right in the toy box, right?
Yeah.
And it was just, it didn't make a lot of sense but it was fun. And I think that's kind of like, and that's one of the negative things I will say that kind of came out of the whole Wizarding World thing, as incredible that of a land that is, and how revolutionary it was. It sort of took the theme park industry in a very serious direction. It was very much like, oh, you can't see anything, and you're and it kind of, they went like overboard, like with it, like not just Universal, Disney too. Everyone went overboard. It was just like, we're taking this so fucking seriously now, and you're not going to be able to see anything, and you're not going to see your family for 4 days because you're going to be living this thing, and it's like, come on, it's like, dude,
I mean, and it kind of it kills a lot of the fun and whimsy of it a little bit, just because it's like, oh, we're gonna be so hyper immersed, and the standards now, I think that's what's contributed to like sightline standards and so forth being as high as they are right now, because people expect that same level of immersion from everything else, and some things kind of fall apart when you look at it from that perspective, right? Whereas the kind of the casual guest, that they have a kind of a different inclination or a different feeling when it comes to these things, and we see that, right? I think the general populace wanted a more traditional Star Wars land, whereas the kind of the fans that were super excited were excited for that immersive atmosphere that they never got, and that kind of that back and forth, I think, has really kind of hurt Star Wars Galaxy's Edge in the long run. It's fascinating you bring up Walt. This is kind of why I have a really deep fondness for the second generation Imagineers, the Bruce Gordons, the Eddie Satos, the Tony Baxters, all those guys, because they came at it from, it was really the first generation of Imagineers, which were, they grew up to be fans of the genre, or fans of the medium, before they actually got into Walt Disney Imagineering. Previously, I mean, the guys from WED and stuff like that, the Mark Davis, the Claude Coates, Mary Blair, they were unbelievable in their craft. But again, they were making the medium as they went along, right? They were, basically being commissioned by Walt to bring what he wanted to life, and some of those concepts and ideas and everything was just spectacular. But the second generation Imagineers were able to see that from kind of a fan's or kind of a guest's perspective, right? And like grow up with that medium already being established. So as fans of the genre, they were able to take a lot of those concepts and say, okay, me being a fan and as a guest, right, who loves these parks, what would I do? And so we got some incredible takes on those ideas and those classic concepts. Disneyland Paris being probably the epitome of all that, right? A reflection of that kind of theme park design. And they did really kind of forward the genre forward. I think Splash Mountain comes to mind, but also Indiana Jones Adventure, right? Where you're kind of thrust into an adventure and you're taking a leading role within it, and I just some of that stuff. I mean, you can tell they were theme park fans. They were passionate about the medium, and they were putting all they could into it. And I think that's why their projects, as they compare to projects after and maybe even before, don't quite hold up as well as they. As well as theirs does today, because you could just feel it. There was a reverberation of their passion imbued into their work.
No, there was. And that's why I love, and I'm going to sound like such an old geezer, like get off my lawn kind of guy, but that's why I love the 90s so much, because I feel like the 90s were like the perfect, in terms of like Hollywood, in terms of like theme parks, in terms of like just nerd stuff, right? The 90s were like the perfect bridge, really, between like the old school way of doing things, like the Walt era and all that, and like the new. And it was like that perfect kind of Goldilocks, where we got like things that were reminiscent of the past, but they moved that concept forward. And it was like you mentioned, Indiana Jones Adventure. It was like, okay, that's very reminiscent of a Pirates of the Caribbean or a Haunted Mansion, but it's next gen. Right. But it's also next gen, but it's familiar too, though. Right. It could sit on the same kind of shelf as a Pirates. It felt very similar, but it was new. And then even in animation, we felt like it's kind of the same kind of thing. It's like, okay, so Beauty and the Beast, it feels like a Walt era movie, but it also felt kind of new. So it's in the same realm of Walt's era and the old school, but it was new enough where it was like, okay, this is a move forward though, you know? And that's what I love about the 90s. It did that so well over and over and over and over again. It wasn't just Disney. Warner Brothers did that, like with Tiny Toons and Animaniacs, where it was like, it was reminiscent of the old Looney Tunes and the old cartoons, but it was new enough that it felt fresh. The 90s were just that perfect Goldilocks era.
Well, yeah. Well, it's kind of, it's cyclical, right? It happens almost every 30, 40 years, something like that, right? Where you have the explosion of the baby boomer generation. That's what kind of, is the backdrop to Disneyland's inception back in 1955, right? These baby boomers need a place to go. Disneyland is that outlet, right? And then when the baby boomers end up having, children themselves, well, that's what gives rise to a kind of a new spate of family-driven entertainment and really kind of an explosion of theme park-related concept and ideas as we got in the late 80s, early 90s. It was off of these kind of new wave of families that were coming in. That's where you saw like Vegas, for example, go a little bit more theme park and family orientated. You had a radical explosion of a different theme park, ideas, concepts from a variety of different proprietors, and different family-driven entertainment when it came to kids programming and all that kind of stuff. That all happens because, hey, the baby boomers' kids need something to watch or experience themselves, and so you just get an explosion of different of talent, of different ideas and concepts, and maybe we're seeing that come back, but in kind of a different way now with some of these other theme park concepts. And maybe that was a driving force for Dubai and these other places as some of these locales get a little bit more tourist driven in their in their demographics regarding their industry and economies and so forth.
Yeah, fascinating, absolutely fascinating. To kind of touch upon a little bit before we go,
sure,
like how amazing the 90s were.
Oh yeah,
we literally had animated TV shows directed by Steven Spielberg with like Tiny Toons and Animaniacs. I mean, like what world? Like that's insane to even think about that was a thing in the 90s. Like freaking insane. You had Steven Spielberg, the man who could never like. I am a huge Steven Spielberg fan. Like this guy. Oh yeah. West Side Story.
Yes.
He never directed a musical in his life. That was his first musical out the gate. And he decides, you know what, I'm going to remake a classic. And it's his first musical. He's going to remake a classic. So there's already this huge expectation. The guy destroys it. And it's better than the original, in my opinion. How does he do that? And you have that guy making animated TV shows. Like, what the hell? It was such a great time it was just a great time. It really was. And, we'll probably see it again. I think we will see that same kind of renaissance again when it comes to entertainment. It's just, I always look back at the 90s, go, man, were we lucky with that stuff between the Disney Renaissance and the Warner Brothers stuff on television and the Disney Afternoon and the theme park stuff with Indiana Jones Adventure and this, that, and the other, and the Walt Disney World. Massive expansion. There was just so much, dude. It was like
there was a lot, man. There you just got an explosion of different creative outlets and just content. Like you said, Steven Spielberg directing animation, stuff like that. Apparently he was a big animation fan. That was obviously he teamed up with what is the animator who left Disney? Took half his animation staff with him, did American Tail. Oh, who am I thinking
Don Bluth.
Don Bluth, right? And he teamed up with him to do Amblin and stuff like that. And that's kind of how Steven Spielberg kind of gets to the animation game. Obviously, he had, ties to Disney in regards to that, right? With Roger Rabbit, Who Framed Roger Rabbit,
Another
right?
one, yeah.
It's just some incredible, beautiful things that
Yeah.
came out of. Honestly, I mean, it's kind of it's indicative of the Imagineers, the second generation Imagineers, right? They grew up as fans of the platform or the medium and
Right.
so forth, and really wanted to bring kind of forward thinking or kind of next gen things to the American populace, and to viewers and teens and all that around the world.
Right.
So it's some exciting stuff. It'd be like Steven Spielberg doing animation today would be like if Christopher Nolan wanted to direct like an animated film.
Right.
Like that's how out there that concept is.
It blows my mind. It'd be like, yeah, exactly. If Christopher Nolan announced, hey, I'm going to direct the new Disney television animation show, it's like, oh my God,
Wait, what?
are you kidding me? Like, this
Yeah.
is insane, And it happened basically in the 90s. It was freaking amazing. Absolutely amazing. But
It's wild, man. It's wild. And to wrap up here a little bit, what happened to Dubai Land? Well, I guess talks between Riva, Vivali, and Disney, they just kind of broke down. So the Disney fantasy on the edge of a ancient oasis unfortunately never happened. But as we say, good ideas never die. Maybe some of these things are the inspirations for theme park concepts that we might see in a park maybe closer to your neck of the woods. So who knows?
100%. No, 100%. And we've even touched upon that with like Disneyland Forward and the indoor concepts that they were planning for Dubai that could easily be utilized in Anaheim to kind of hide things because you're limited on space.
Mhm.
There's so much. Even Westcott, we all love Westcott. There's probably concepts within like Westcott as a park is dead. They're never going to build that. I've come to terms with that. But there are elements in there that might resurface, even in animation. Walt Disney and Mark Davis were kicking around the Snow Queen in like the 30s and the 40s. And then we saw the Snow Queen movie Frozen come out in 2013, decades later. You never, ever, ever know. Actually, I even think Little Mermaid was on the books for Walt. I think he wanted to do a Little Mermaid movie as well.
Yeah, I know he absolutely wanted to do a Beauty and the Beast movie and could never get past the whole thing about Beauty and the Beast, right? The Beast basically asks Belle, the character Belle in the story, to marry him like over and over and over and over again, and they eventually get married. That's kind of how Beauty and the Beast kind of goes once Belle gets imprisoned in the mansion. So it's like ooh, not really compelling theater, right? But hey, that's when they kind of the Renaissance animators, right? They kind of take that concept and go, wait a minute, we got to fill this in with something. What if the house was magical itself, and what if the furniture and some of the design aesthetics actually came to life? And that's where you get Lumiere and Cogsworth and stuff like that to kind of more round out that story. And to give it a little bit more substance, and they cracked the code. They did something that Walt Disney couldn't do himself. So it's a fascinating kind of thing there. How these ideas come back up. It's really interesting.
It's wild, absolutely wild. Dr. Dre, host of Freshly Squeezed. I want to thank you so much, brother, for coming on and talking about this. This is a fascinating conversation today. If you can let everybody home know where they can find you on social media, sir.
Hey, the best place to find me is going to be at Vashka. It's right down there. Just go ahead and type that in there. Should pop up on Twitter. And if you want to see me, well, it's going to be on the channel you're watching right now at Orange Grove 55 at Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy news and info squeezed fresh. Squeezed fresh right from the Grove.
But really nothing compares with a freshly squeezed.
I love it. I love that. I love that whole thing. Now, speaking of international parks, in this case, this was a park that never came to fruition, right? Apparently, the other parks that have come to fruition when it comes to Dubai, they have low attendance and they've been struggling financially to stay afloat, unfortunately. But another place that wanted its own kind of, I don't know, would you say maybe theme park empire or theme park tourist destination. We might be talking about it tomorrow. Should we give our viewers a little bit of hint of what we're talking about?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll let you do the honors.
Well, Disney has, many theme parks. Obviously, we know the two resorts in the States, right? We have one in Europe. We have one in Japan. And then we also have a couple of resorts in China. And so sit back, folks. It's going to be a crazy ride on with this certain unique geopolitical climate that we're in today. What might be the fate of these parks going forward, and what are the kind of complications that could arise with certain tensions, let's just say, between the United States and that side of the world. It's going to be a fascinating conversation, folks. You want to tune into this one.
Yep, absolutely. I want to thank you all so much for watching. And Dre, as always, I want to thank you for coming on, brother. Fantastic conversation. Comment down below with all your thoughts on the Magic Kingdom Dubai concept, in terms of like what we talked about, in terms of how the 90s were really like the best thing ever. and it really, like we talked about, how good ideas really never die. They never die. And what concepts in this Dubai concept art could potentially come here to Anaheim, or even in Orlando, Florida, or any of the parks, really, Paris, whatever. What can they learn from this concept? Because, Imagineering never really kills an idea. They really never do. So fascinating. But comment down below. We'd love to hear from you. And as always, have a wonderful, wonderful day.